What's happening, everyone? Harry Green here with Neural DSP, and today we're going to be diving deep into our latest plugin, Parallax X. This is an update to our hugely popular plugin, Parallax, and features a refreshed user interface, as well as several quality of life improvements. We're also excited to bring compatibility for Quad Cortex in a future CoreOS update. So what is Parallax X, and why is it useful for us bassists? This is a multi-band distortion plugin for bass, where low, mid, and high frequencies are processed separately, in parallel, and then mixed back together. Parallel processing helps you shape your perfect bass tone, because it allows you to keep the clarity and punch of the low end, while giving you harmonic richness and definition in the mids and highs. This is great for dialing in a more balanced and dynamic overall sound. Before we dive into dialing some tones, let's take a quick look at the layout of Parallax X. So as we open up the plugin, we're greeted by our first page here, which is the channel strip section. At the top, we have some of our global features, and then just underneath, we've got our spectrum analyzer and its controls. We have our low, mid, and high parameters, and in the bottom right, we have our EQ. And then at the very bottom, we have the remainder of our global features. Moving on over to the second page, we have our speakers, mic models, and placement. So this channel strip section is centered around 3 bands. As we can see, we've got the low, the mid, and the high on our spectrum analyzer. With these, we can click and drag. And as we can see down below, the respective controls move in real time with them. So now let's reset this default preset. As I play, you will see that a waveform will be displayed on the screen. This can be deactivated by toggling the Show Spectrum Analyzer toggle here. Let's activate this again and move on. We're going to take a look at each band individually, starting with the lows, and we do this by disabling our high and mid using the toggle switches. We've now got the lows in isolation with our compression set to 50%, our low pass on 200 Hz, and our level at minus 12 dB, and this is how it sounds. Let's take a look at the first dial within the lows, which is compression. We're going to roll this all the way off to start with, and here's how it sounds. Here we have total dynamic range at 0% compression, but alternatively, if you want a more pinned and consistent low end, you can take it all the way up to 100%, and let's see how that sounds. And as you could see, we have a light beside the compression dial that informs us when gain reduction has been applied. So now let's reset the compression back to 50%. And we're going to take a look at our second dial, which is the low pass. Currently set at 200 Hz, we can dial it all the way back to 70 Hz for a really sub-focused low end. Alternatively, we can dial this all the way up to 400 Hz to bring in a lot more mid-range. And if you want to adjust the volume of the lows, we have the low level dial. Now we're going to reset the low parameters and isolate the mid distortion. And here we have two dials, mid drive and mid level. The mid drive, as you can see, is currently at 50%, and it sounds like this. To give it some context, let's bring in our low band and start with our mid distortion at 0%. So now, using the mid drive control, we can apply distortion specifically to the mid frequencies. Let's hear it at 50%. With independent control of our lows and mids, we're really starting to shape our sound. Let's crank it all the way up to 100% and see how that sounds. Now, let's reset these and move on to the high distortion band. And over here, as you can see, we've got high drive set at 50%. Our high pass is currently at 800 Hertz, with our level being at minus 12 dB. And let's see how that sounds. Starting off in the high distortion band, we've got the high drive dial. Let's hear the full range of this high drive parameter from 0 to 100%. So as you can see, on top of distortion for the mid-range, we have an independent distortion for high frequencies as well. Next to this, we have our high pass dial, and that ranges all the way down to 100 Hertz. Let's hear how that sounds. We can also dial this all the way up to 2000 Hertz, and let's hear how that sounds. As you can hear, the vast range of this high pass dial allows us to add a further level of distortion into a wide range of frequencies. And finally, in our high distortion band, we have the high level dial, and this controls overall volume for all of our high frequencies. So now, let's reset to the default preset and have a look at using all three bands in conjunction with each other. To do this, we're going to start by deactivating our high distortion and mid distortion and focusing on our lows and working our way up from there. So I know that I want quite a tight low end. I'm going to gun this up just a little bit, right around to 75%. I want to give ourselves plenty of room in the low end. So aim for around 260. And let's boost it a little bit, shall we? Because who doesn't like more bass as a bass player? Here's where we're at. So a really solid foundation to start us off with. We've got compression set to 75%. And obviously with that low level boosted up just that little bit, it really allows for a tight and consistent low end. Let's bring the mids in and see how they sound with the distortion turned on. Now with a tone that I'm trying to create here, I would like quite a crunch tone, and typically for me, I like to roll back mids within this. So let's see how it will sound if I roll this down. We're still going to be having a rather subby tone, but all of the distortion for me in a crunch will come from the high. So let's see how that sounds. Pretty consistent with the low end. I like how it's sounding already. I may come back and tweak it again as we bring the other parameters in, but for now, let's move on to the high distortion and see where we can really get that crunch tone in. With the high distortion band set at default, here's how it sounds. Now, I'm very aware that when I talked about my crunch sound a little minute ago, it's all going to be coming from this high distortion band. So let's get a nice crunch by rolling it all the way up to, let's say, 80% and seeing how it sounds. That sounds great. Really happy with that. It's actually exactly what I was aiming for. Out of curiosity, let's try bringing the mids up a little bit and see the kind of tone we can get if we mess around. I'm also going to gun the high distortion drive here all the way up to 100%. So that also sounds great to me, and it's amazing to see that utilizing these 3 bands, you can really sculpt and elevate your bass tone. Moving on, the final section of the channel strip is the equalizer, which can be found in the bottom right. This is a 6-band master EQ that is placed after the cab section in the signal chain. Here we have 6 faders consisting of a low shelf, 4 fixed frequencies, and a high shelf, and they can each be dialed in to plus or minus 12 dB. So here's a quick recap of the tone we just made. Now let's use the equalizer to shape our tone even further. I'm going to add in just a gentle EQ to take out a little bit more of the mids and add in some more highs. And let's hear how that sounds. So that really bolstered the low end, as you could hear, and added some wonderful clarity to the highs. And in combination with the multi-band control, the equalizer really is great in the final stage of processing. Now we find ourselves on page 2 of Parallax X, which is the cab section. As we can see here, we have 6 internal mics per speaker available to us, along with the ability to load in custom IRs. Closing the drop-down menu, below this, we have 4 parameters: mic level, mic pan, mic position, and mic distance. To keep it simple, I'm going to disable the cabinet on the right-hand side and walk you through the controls using the speaker on the left. Before we make any changes, this is how the Dynamic 57 sounds on the left cabinet. That was the Dynamic 57. Let's go to our drop-down menu here and select a Condenser 184 and see how that sounds. So that was the Condenser 184. Let's try one more mic. I'm going to go for the Ribbon 160, and it sounds a little like this. Along with the 6 mics provided, you also have the ability to load in your own custom IRs. And we can do this by accessing the drop-down menu, clicking the load button, and locating the file on your own computer. Switching back to the Dynamic 57, let's take a look at our mic placement controls. The first level dial will control the mic volume that we have selected. Moving our way down, we have pan, and if I just play a little bit with the pan central, and then move it along over far right, you'll hear there that my bass is then panned completely to the right-hand side. Let's reset the pan and move on down to the position dial. The position dial refers to the position of the microphone on the speaker. And typically, the more central that you have the microphone, you'll tend to get a much more brighter tone. Let's see how that sounds. And towards the outside of the cone, it would become much darker. Resetting the position dial, we can then move on to the distance dial. Typically, the closer the microphone to the speaker, the more focused the sound. This is what it sounds like with the distance set to 0. And now if we just move it to its maximum value, this is what it sounds like far away. You'll notice as we adjust these parameters, the visual on the left is mirroring these changes in real time. It is also possible to click and drag the visual as if you were adjusting a mic on a speaker cone. So let's reset these parameters and bring in the second mic. Before we blend the two, let's hear what the right microphone sounds like on its own, and we can do this by bypassing the left IR using the on-off toggle switch here. Here's how the ribbon 121 on the right sounds by itself. Now I'm going to bring back in the first IR that we used on the left, utilizing the toggle on-off switch here, and here's how they sound together. So we've seen how powerful these controls are per microphone. Now that we have two mics loaded, we can use these controls to blend them together. In this instance, I'm going to take the ribbon 121 and distance it all the way out. And I'm also going to make some minor adjustments to the dynamic 57 by positioning it inwards and moving the level and distance just slightly. And it sounds a little like this. And just because I can, I'm going to take both the microphones and pan them left and right to widen them in the stereo field. And it sounds something like this. One of the features to note is each side of the cab sim has its own phase toggle button. This allows you to independently invert the phase of either microphone. So that's the cab section in Parallax X. As you can see, this gives you studio level control over your mic choice and placement, all in the convenience of a plugin. So now let's take a look at some factory and artist presets. Now, let's take a look at building and saving our own preset. Just as a reminder, here's our current sound with the default preset. I really want to try and get a heavy, aggressive bass tone out of this preset. So let's start by bolstering the compression up to 75% to keep that nice, tight low end. And I am a fan of the lows, so let's boost it up to around -9 dB. Mid distortion, we're going to crank it to 100. High drive, let's push a bit of that as well. And I'm going to bring the high pass down to 600. Let's hear how that sounds now that we've made some adjustments. That's really heading in the right direction of how I wanted this to sound. I am starting to notice a little bit of unwanted noise, so let's head over to the gate and boost that up to 50. I also want to take away some of the high fizz, so I'm going to bring down the high level by quite a bit. And let's hear how that sounds with those adjustments. So that's sounding really great. It's really tightened up the sound. Let's move over to the equalizer and just make some final adjustments utilizing the 6-band here. And let's see how that sounds. I'm really happy with how that's starting to sound now. So let's move on over to the cab section and see what we can add from there. We've got a dynamic 57 on the left, and with the position, I'm going to drag it in to make it nice and central, get that really tight. And with the ribbon 121, I'm going to do the same, but I'm actually going to push the distance further out by quite some way to really give us that depth in our overall bass tone. Let's take a listen to how that sounds with those adjustments. Great. Now all that's left is to save our preset. Let's head on up to the Save As button, click that, label our preset, and click Save. And now our preset is saved within the user folder within our preset manager. So that's how quick and easy it is to build and save a preset using Parallax X. Now, let's have a look at the global features for Parallax X. Starting off at the far left of the plugin, we have input. This is essentially the overall input that you are sending into the plugin. And next to it, we have a visual level meter where we can see our input coming in. If we were to clip the input, you would be notified by a red line on the level meter. Let's crank it all the way up to its maximum value and see that in action. So if your input signal is clipping, you can attenuate it by bringing down the input dial. Let's reset the input back to its default and move on to the gate. The gate dial allows us to cut off any unwanted noise. At its default, it's set at -80 dB, and this refers to the threshold of the gate. Let's disengage this with the toggle switch here and hear how it sounds without. We can further increase the threshold using the dial below, and this will remove any further unwanted noise. You'll also hear it will really start to tighten up our sound. Let's reset this to default and have a look at our transpose dial. The transpose dial allows us to change the pitch of our instrument by up to 12 semitones either way. Let's hear how my bass sounds with the transpose set to 0. And now let's take it down to -4 semitones and see how that sounds. Alternatively, we'll move it up to +4 so you can hear how it sounds the other way. This is incredibly useful for changing pitch on the fly. Let's reset this and move over to input mode. If you have a stereo input source, you would be able to select this with the toggle switch here. Obviously, I'm using a bass right now, which is sending a mono signal, hence why it's currently grayed out. Next to this, we have our preset manager. Clicking the drop-down menu gives us access to all of our presets. We have our default and then folders for artists, Neural DSP, and user presets. Above the drop-down menu, we also have the ability to cycle through our presets using the left and right arrows. And just to the right of this, we also have our delete, save, and save as options for new presets. Clicking the icon here will enable us to import a preset from anywhere in your computer. You can reset the current preset to its saved parameters, and locate file will take you directly to where the presets are saved on your computer. Finally, we have the output controls. This is the master volume for the plugin. Here we have an output level meter to indicate our signal level and show if we are clipping. And if we are clipping, we can attenuate the level and bring it down. Alternatively, for more signal, we can boost the overall volume. At the bottom left of the plugin window, we have the tuner menu. When you open this, at the top right, we have a mute or unmute button toggle switch. With the mute button bypassed, I can hear my signal when tuning. And if we press the toggle switch to mute it, the sound is no longer there. Below that, we have the tuner reading in cents. However, you can change this to hertz with the toggle switch at the bottom left, and that will be showcased above the tuner reading. In the middle of the tuner menu, we have the live tuner toggle switch. Selecting this will visibly allow you to see a live tuner reading at the bottom left of the main plugin window. And then on the far right of the tuner, we have the tuning standard set to 440 by default. Closing the tuner menu, let's take a look at the MIDI menu. This is going to show you any assigned MIDI mapping information for the plugin. We then have the tap button, and you can click this at any BPM, and the global BPM will change accordingly. Alternatively, you can double-click this number beside it and type in a value. We then have the metronome. Opening this up, at the top left, we have the volume of the metronome. Next to that, we have the time signature, where you can select a variety of time signatures from quarter notes to eighth note subdivisions. On the right of that, we have the sound option for the metronome with a variety of choices. And next to that, we have the pan control. So you can pan the metronome in the stereo field, either hard left or hard right. Below this, we have the BPM reading, where you can change it incrementally with the arrows, or you can type in a new value, or alternatively, tap in a BPM. Next to that, we have the rhythm of the metronome in quarter notes, eighth note triplets, or 16th notes. And then on the right, the play button for the metronome. Below that, we then have the four icons relating to the accents of the metronome, and we can change these accordingly for a different pattern. Closing the metronome window, we also have a play button so you can play it from the main plugin window. Next to that, we have the main settings menu. Here you can configure your audio device type, your audio input device, and your audio output device, as well as any relevant input and output channels for your selected interface. Below that, we then have the sample rate, the audio buffer size, and also an option to assign input devices if you use those within the plugin as well. Finally, at the bottom right of the plugin window, we have the plugin size, varying from small, medium, large, extra large to maximum. So there we go. That is a deep dive into Parallax X. And as you can see, this is a very versatile and useful multi-band distortion plugin for bass. I hope you've enjoyed dialing in some sounds with me and learning what this plugin can do for you. To get a free trial of Parallax X today, head over to neuraldsp.com. I've been Harry Green, and thanks for watching.